Hi everyone, welcome to Inspired Tarot Map. And today I'm hosting Belinda Gore and Ellen Colland. This is our second meeting and we are talking about aging. Aging is unavoidable. We all going to age and we all going to die. But is old age always horrible? We want to discuss this. Ellen is nearly 80, right? Ellen, or are you already? Yeah, you're nearly 80. And Belinda,
I'll be 80 in April.
you 80 in April. And you, Belinda, 70.
I just turned 76.
76. So, you've been around for a while. And you're both really inspiring. And if you haven't heard our first conversation, it's going to be linked below. And we finished our first chat on the subject of love. Because these two wonderful ladies are here to, I think, break maybe some stereotypes about that, because not maybe that we think a lot about it, maybe it's not a stereotype, but I haven't heard too many people saying, oh yeah, if you're older, you can fall in love and you can be really happy, and it's like the same as if you're younger. So you two actually are in a happy relationship, in happy relationships, and you have both partners that you met after the death of your husbands. You both share a similar story. And I'm dying to know, how did you meet your boyfriends? And how did you, did you think it was possible? Did you look for it? Did it just happen? Whoever wants to start, please indulge us with the stories, because I think that's wonderful.
Ellen, you go.
I go. Okay. Well, my husband died in 2007, and I did not date at all. I had no desire to date. And initially, for the first several years, I was terrified of the idea, quite honestly, because I didn't want to suffer another broken heart. So I was very defended against it. And but over time, I began to desire at least a friendship with a man or someone, to do something with, because I love male company, and, that was kind of missing in my life. But the way I met my partner is that he lived in a beautiful house on the bluff, and a friend of his had asked if they could hold a fundraiser for a women's group in Tanzania. And because I had been to Africa several times and really loved my experiences there, a mutual friend of ours asked me if I would like to have her ticket because she couldn't go, and asked if I would like to go to the fundraiser. So that's how we met. I met him at his house as he was hosting, I don't know, 100 people at this fundraiser. And I was really struck by his warmth and his lightness and humor. So when, we were talking, and it turned out that we were each going on hikes. I was going on the hike that Belinda was on, an RAI hike to Ireland, and he was going on a hike in Italy with a group called the Hedonistic Hikers, who we subsequently did hikes with together. But we agreed that we would get together after those hikes, because he had just lost his wife the month before, and he was nowhere near ready. And so we decided that we would just meet after our hikes were over. And, so that was, I don't know, 4 or 5 months after our initial meeting. And, that's kind of how it happened. We started going for walks and hikes and stuff, then to movies and dinner. And, then there was this beautiful evolution that occurred over time. So we've been.
Can I bump in? So how did you feel when you saw, was it, no, you were in love. You were in love with your husband. How was it? Was it the same? How old were you then?
I was 62 when my husband died.
But when you met your
So
partner,
when I met Dell, I was, let me see, 80, I was 73.
73, and you walk in, you see him, did you feel like heart
Yes,
beating? Like you
I
go like,
did.
ooh, I
It felt,
like him inside. Did you blush?
no, I didn't blush, but yes, there was that spark of, that you
Interest.
feel when you meet someone who you think is really interesting and attractive. And yeah, I can't say that it was any different, really. I think what was different for me is that I didn't have expectations of a full relationship. I mean, when I thought about a relationship at this stage in life, I felt like I would have been perfectly happy having a mate, having a friend who I could do things with. And so the surprise was in the fullness of the relationship that developed. And, we can talk about that later, how a relationship at this stage, in my mind, is very different from earlier relationships that I was in. But yes, that was the way we met.
Okay, that's cool.
An
Like,
old-fashioned way, actually.
yeah, not through an app, but still quite, yeah, quite lovely. So we're going to get into the relationships differences. But Belinda, how did you meet your partner?
Through mutual friends. Um, I was at a gathering and he um, is from New Zealand, and I have good friends in New Zealand. And in fact, after my husband died, I was 65 when John died, and uh, my friend said, "You're not going through an Ohio winter this winter. You're coming here." So I'd spent a month in New Zealand, and I had these friends for some years. But so I just said to him, "Your accent sounds familiar. I think you might be from," and then I just kind of paused. I said, "New Zealand?" And he was a little surprised because mostly people either say Australia, maybe South Africa. I said, "Yeah, I spent a month in the Wairarapa." It's like I worked in the Wairarapa. I was the director of a museum there. And, I drove from here to here. And do you know where this is? And, so we were engaged in that. And he had put together an exhibition of tapa cloth. He has a good friend who's Dame Robin White, who has worked with women in Polynesia around reclaiming the traditions of how to make tapa. And so he'd put together an exhibition here in Central Ohio. And he invited me, he said if I wanted to come out, he'd meet me there. And, so that was sort of our first date. That night, my father, who was 94, fell. He had a blood clot. He was in the hospital 3 weeks. He'd had a surgery, and then he got pneumonia and he came home with hospice. So for about 7 or 8 weeks, I was just focused on my dad. And he was, I just came to my dad's funeral and, but it didn't develop quickly, is what I'm trying to say. And in fact, developed slowly. I knew when my husband died that I would like to have some kind of other relationship. And I feel like I got help in my first step was actually a good friend of John's broke up in his relationship, and he wasn't trying to date me, but he texted me. Now, this was 10 years ago. So he taught me how to text, And so at night, at the end of the day, when I was feeling kind of alone, he and I would text a lot. So then there was somebody else who I was a little interested in, but then not really. And he lived several states away. And then an old friend got divorced, and he and I dated for a hot minute. And I think it was just both of us were finding out, can I do this? And I found out that I could, and do this is, but I have sex again and
Yeah.
in my late 60s, with somebody who wasn't my husband. It had been
Yeah.
like by that time 30 years since I'd had sex with anybody other than my husband. So I had to learn how to do that, so I kind of took step by step. But I have a very different kind of relationship than Ellen has, because he's 9 years younger than me. He lives 45 miles away. He had children later in his life, so he still has childcare. Um, he has his daughters every other weekend and the younger one during the week every week. Um, but we're both Aquarians. And so I was listening to somebody recently, and she said, you may meet somebody out of the blue who's younger or from another country, or, you have an unusual setup. And I thought, tick, 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 all those things, yes. Um, but I also live with an old friend who moved back to this area about 5 or 6 months after John died. And so we've lived together about 10 years. Yeah. And it's a very good relationship in terms of we foster each other's creativity. And so I share my house with Judy, but I have a relationship. And Marcus and I co-founded a nonprofit together. So we work together. So we have those, we have several layers of that relationship, but we don't live together.
Yeah. So did you also did you feel surprised as well, like when it started evolving that, or was it so
But,
organic and slow that like you didn't notice? Oh, it changed.
well,
Now he's my boyfriend.
no. By the time we started dating, and he said, it sounds like around here dating is a euphemism for having sex, and it's like, well, in a way that's true. But I liked him, I enjoyed him. And then when we started dating, I started falling in love with him, and I was terrified.
Mm.
Judy laughs at the memory of me because I'd be just exhilarated, and then I'd be terrified, and I'd cry, and what's happening to me, and blah blah blah, and then I'd be exhilarated, and so I
Just the
was
regular.
about I was about 15, you know.
But I think that's really wonderful because that's what we kind of also wanted to say, that like age doesn't matter in
Yeah.
that department, right? Like you've been in love before. It doesn't matter that like you knew what it is and like your head
Mm,
was telling you whatever. Like when the emotion hits you,
mm,
you're behaving like you're 15.
Yes. The
Did
same
you
thing
feel this
happened with
too?
me.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, anticipating a date or, yes, kind of walking around with that little glow on my face. And, my gardener always says, Ellen, you look so different since you've been with Dell. It was like, and, there's kind of a happiness there. There's a glow there that might have been missing in those 10 years, when I was on my own. And so, yeah, I felt many, in the early stages in particular, and excitement that you feel when you're younger, the anxiety that you also feel, is how's this going to work, and, what's going to happen, the stuff that you feel when you're 30 or 40 years younger was very present for me. So
So cool.
yeah.
And both of you are also having relationship that like that asexual as well. It didn't stop at like, I don't know, 60 or 65.
Oh no.
Like we
Oh
still
no, not at all.
feel sexual, right? Like that, like when we get
Yes.
older, that doesn't disappear suddenly and you like dried old peach.
Yeah. No, that was the delightful surprise, I would say. That's very much a part of our relationship, and we both derive so much joy from that. And that was unexpected. I wasn't sure that was going to be part of a relationship
Mhm.
at this age. So it's a wonderful aspect of what we have, actually.
That's so cool. And you, Ellen, you live together, right? Or you also live?
No, we
No.
mine isn't very traditional either. It's untraditional in a different way from Belinda's, but we have our own houses. We live 3 miles apart from one another. We do spend most nights together
Yeah.
at one house or the other. That has its benefits and it has its frustrations, just like anything else. But ultimately, I think having the two houses works well for us. So usually during the day, we're doing our own thing, and then we're together for dinner, evening and night, and then we say goodbye in the morning, like we're going to work, and come
Yeah,
back somewhere late in the afternoon.
that's cool.
So
I
it's
think
nice
the older
because
we
there's,
get, we appreciate space.
yeah,
Even like being in a relationship for, well, we got together 2010, married since 2014, so not that long, but long enough. Like, and menopausal. Like, I want my space. I don't even, I'm not afraid to say loudly right now that I would prefer to sleep by myself right now. Like, I don't really, I feel much more comfortable with having my own space and don't necessarily, I don't want anybody too close for too long. But yes, be with me. Just give me my space. Give me my space. Don't
I'm
come.
a bit that way myself. So, but it works. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think everybody finds their own,
Right.
ways as usual. Like, and when it fits, it
And
fits. I just love it. But Belinda, you mentioned something wonderful, and you, Ellen, as well, about those different types of love. That first of all, like you didn't even expect that it's going to be that romantic love. So romantic love, take elder older age doesn't mean you can't fall in love and behave like 15. That's bullshit. Like you can. And then you, Belinda, live with like a woman, and you don't have any romantic relationship with her like this, but you both friends, and that also gives you this sense of companionship, and like that's another side of love. Mhm.
I've known her 45 years, and she moved away for 30 years and moved back to Ohio. Um, it's I don't have a sister or brother, but she feels like a sister. Um, she and I are very different in a lot of ways, and we share. I mean, we truly care about each other. We love each other, want what's good for each other. Um, she lives her life, I live my life, and every morning we draw tarot and oracle cards together.
Hi,
And
Julie.
yeah, right. I know you through her.
That's so
Um,
fun.
and that um, we support each other's creativity and other kinds of things. And it allows me to, um, I think in my life, I grew up with a mother who taught me that I needed to be in a relationship with a man in order to be complete and whole.
Mm.
And um, I have an unusual situation in which I have a wonderful relationship with a man I love, and I don't live with him, and I get to practice a kind of independence that nourishes my Aquarian soul.
Mm.
And so um, this is good for me. This is a different chapter in my life, that I can practice with aloneness. It's not about loneliness. I can be on my own to some degree. I can be with Judy. I can be with him. I can be with friends, but lots of different ways of being. And I know that's true for you, Ellen, but in a different way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, for me, having women friends has always been an important part of my life. I mean, girlfriends when I was little. I grew up in kind of a dysfunctional family, and the place where I could be me as a child was with my friends. And I still, at this age, am friends with two that one of them I met when I was 5, and the other one I met when I was 7. And we're still friends. And I have other friends as well. Close friends who I make a point of seeing because I think that having those friendships is really enhances the quality of life, and as my sister and I have gotten older, she's 6 years older than I am, and she lives on the other side of the country. She lives in Delaware, I'm in California. We talk every single week, and we have the most extraordinary conversations that we never had when we were siblings. We were not close as none of us were close in my family. We all went in different directions. And to have that reunion with my sister and have that the depth of quality with a sibling is an amazing gift. And I am, very, very grateful for that, as well as the longer friendships that I've had because they are like sisters to me. We went through so much, in our youth that we're bound together in kind of a sibling sort of way, and I really appreciate that. So friendships are a very important part of my day, my week, my world. So
And they're very important for like general well-being, I think. Would you say, both of you, that like having friends, female friends, male friends, that's sustains us?
Um, one of the things, my father died after my husband died, and my mom died 25 years ago. I don't have children of my own. I don't have siblings. And so, it was like, I don't have parents. I don't have a spouse. I don't have children. I don't have siblings. And it took me a moment to say, those are traditional kinds of relationships, and I don't have those. One of my daughters-in-law and I talk every week. She's in her early 30s. I'm close to cousins, and I'm learning to appreciate their children. But I have friends who are in their late 40s and mid 50s, as well as 60s and 70s and 80s. And I enjoy the fact that when we stay engaged in life, we become attracted to people who are of all different ages because we have things in common that we enjoy. Like when you and I met, it's like we had a lot to talk about, even though I'm your mother's age. No.
Totally. You're right. And Judy also, it's so funny that story with Judy. But I wanted to say, like, if anybody watches, what's this? Wait a sec. Sorry. Because I can't remember the name of this lady. Pamela
Tarot of the
and Joyce
Spirit.
Eakins, the creators of Tarot of the Spirit. So on the YouTube channel, Judy gave actually a really interesting talk. Thank you for sending me the link. I did watch it and I highly recommend it if you like the deck. And yeah, you can meet Judy as well on
Yeah.
YouTube.
Right.
Yeah, so I wanted to maybe close off that episode about love, sex, etc., about this, you mentioned, Ellen, the relationships at this age and what's different, and like what do you expect maybe of the relationships later on in life, rather than, this full-blown like being in love, okay, but like you said yourself that you didn't have even expectations too much, like you didn't expect this whole kabang with relationships. What would you say is different later on? Like how
Yeah,
does
well, I hate to, stereotype this because obviously my relationship is very different from Belinda's, equally satisfying in very different ways. But Dell and I often comment on the fact that our relationship at this point in our lives, I think I mentioned he's going to be 85 in June, it's not complicated. I was married twice actually, divorced from my first husband when my daughter was 8 years old, and I was a single parent for a while before I married Cordell, who is the one who died in 2007. And, life was so much more complicated then because I worked full time. I was a parent. There was a lot going on in life. And at this stage in life, being retired and living my life in a quieter way than I used to, it is reflected in our relationship as well because we don't have a million things that are tearing us in all different directions. So there's a real beauty to that. And we're both of the same mind in terms of expressing gratitude on a regular basis. We're very grateful and very aware of the gift that we have at this stage in our lives. And we talk about that. We express appreciation to one another for that. And, at this stage in life, it's easier to stop and savor the beauty of our relationship and our world around us. And when you're younger and I moved at a very fast pace for most of my life. I was in very demanding jobs and all of that. And, so I think having a less complicated life leads to a less complicated, it's not a less complicated relationship necessarily, but it's easier in so many ways. It's easier.
I thought we should call the episode "It's Not Complicated," but that might be too much of a shortcut. What would you say, Belinda? Would you have anything to add to like the
Well,
relationships at this age?
of
Different?
course, we're not coming together to have children. We're not trying to meet someone who's going to be the father of our children and we make a home together to raise children. I know, and when you're in your 20s or 30s, that's often the thought.
So would you
We
say it's a
kind
little bit less like expectation and demand on the other person,
less
vice versa?
less expectation, yes.
Yeah.
We joke that our child is this nonprofit that we built together, but it's not like we both have jobs and then we come home and make dinner together and help the kids with their homework. Although he's getting the experience now in his 60s of being a father, and I love supporting him in that, and I don't need to be a stepmom. I was a stepmom with John's two boys, and I'm delighted that they're in my life now, but they're like 46 and 51, but I get to have a grandchild, even though I didn't have a child of my own, whatever that is, not birthed out of my body. Um, I'm more confident. I'm getting to harvest a lot of things I learned in my life. Um, I am smarter about communication and expectations. I can see more clearly what I learned growing up that wasn't helpful in having a relationship. I also was married once and divorced, and then married and widowed. So um, it's different and better. I love getting older. I don't like that my body droops a little more and stuff, but having a partner who's aging as well is like, okay, we're both doing that. We're both more realistic. And um, I enjoy it so much.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, there is one other thing that
Yeah.
that I would like to add to this. I think at this stage, we have the freedom to define our relationships in ways that work for us. And when you're younger, I went in a very traditional lockstep sort of marriage, that ended in marriage and in my first marriage and having a child, so those steps no longer apply, as Belinda, mentioned. And that is the beauty of it. You can create a relationship that works for both of you, right? We're not married. We see no need to be married, but we are as committed to one another as a person who went through the legal process, right? And, so you get to see those options at this stage and make choices about what's going to work best for you. And I think that's the beauty of it, that there's a freedom here that I didn't feel when I was younger.
Yeah, cool. So to close off, I just hope that we gave anyone who's like struggling and thinking, oh my God, now I'm 50, I'm not going to meet anybody anymore. That's it. My life ended on the relationship front. Ain't true. Here you go. Two living examples that life can surprise you. You can still be sexual. You can still fall in love. You can still meet amazing people. You can still build lovely, sustainable relationships. And well, everything is ahead of you. So, yes, Ellen.
I'm sorry, but you're just sparking a lot of ideas here because I don't want to not talk about the spaces in between. I I was not married or in a relationship for 10 years after my husband died. And that was an important time for me. I mean, part of what happened after my husband died was I had to reconnect with I, because in a deep relationship, there's a third entity created, and that's we. And after Cordell died, it took me a while to, reconnect with me and to be comfortable with, well, I can make decisions all by myself. There's no, that it was very different. And my life in that 10 years was very rich. And I learned a lot about myself that I think I brought into a new relationship. It wasn't an empty time. It was really rich. And, I would say for people who aren't in relationships, that's not the end of the world either.
Mm.
Not being in relationship and
Yeah.
finding yourself, finding your own joy, figuring out who you are as an individual. It was such an important time for me, and I don't want to diminish that.
Because maybe because of it, you actually could have a good working relationship again.
Yeah,
Because
I would say that's
otherwise,
a
yeah.
big part of it. I mean, what I learned in my last marriage and through Cordell's dying process and all of that, as well as those years, I think I was a different person, really, in a lot of ways because of the things that I had learned and the ways in which I grew. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think that's very important. And we mentioned it also, Belinda, before that those in between times, I think that's important to remember, and that like whatever work, I don't know how to name it, but whatever we do for ourselves, in the end, it counts and it's very important. And that grieving process you mentioned also at some point after your husband died, you did go through it and you had to go with it and deal with all these emotions before stepping into, this next stage. And
Yeah.
maybe I was supposed to be so happy, love and sex, but now we went into widowhood. But I was curious, when you go with grief, like you still remember your husbands, right? And you still think of them fondly and love them. And it doesn't take away from having a new relationship, a new person to love. Because I think sometimes when people are deeply in grief, it's kind of like even inimaginable that like they can meet somebody new. Did you go through, like you, Ellen, mentioned a little bit that you were a bit guarded. You think it's
Um,
natural?
I think part of my up and down early on is that I wanted this new relationship. I wanted him to be like John, my husband. I
Oh.
was looking for a similar kind of connection. And because you do astrology, and I suspect people who follow you do as well, um, I have a sun in Aquarius, Taurus rising, moon in Pisces.
Mm.
John was sun in Taurus, moon in Aquarius. I mean, Aquarius rising and Pisces moon.
Wow.
So we were both Pisces moon, which is unusual. Us Pisces moon people are sometimes a little hard to deal with emotionally because
But
we
two
get so
Pisces.
sensitive. It was great. I loved having the level of intuitive alignment that I did. And John was 9 years older. Suddenly I'm with a man who's 9 years younger, who has a moon in Taurus. Now we have the Taurus thing, and we're both Sun and Aquarius, but um, you know, it's like it's a different configuration. And for the longest time, I kept trying to figure out what was wrong and how could I move the relationship toward what felt familiar. And slowly but surely, I had to come to terms with that's not that's not the ideal. That was a a cherished relationship. I
Mm.
will always love John, and I can love someone else. It's just in a different way.
Mm.
And I think, if anything, my grief taught me what, Ellen, you were talking about, to know myself, own myself, understand my choices. And then for me, going through this process was like letting go of an expectation that a good relationship had to be a certain way,
Mm.
because it's not true.
Wow, that's wisdom. And I love that Taurus and Pisces moon connection because you create mad. You have water and earth, it's sex styling. It's still, they work really well together, very creative combo. And you have a
Mm.
little prodigy child of
Mm.
non-profit.
Yeah, right,
So yeah,
right.
that's well. Ellen, would you like to add something to that with the
Well,
grief?
I think what I would like to just add is the recognition that our hearts have a tremendous capacity for love.
Mm.
And, I even found that I have two grandsons, and the oldest one is 6.5. And then, when Jenny and Eric said they were pregnant with the second one, it was like, oh my God, how could I possibly love another baby in the way that I love this one, right? Because I only had one child. Eric was a stepson who came into my life when he was 11 years old. So we're very much mother-son connected, but it was
Yeah.
different. And boy, when that second one came, it was like, oh my God, I love this child. And it's kind of the same,
Mm.
I was, after Cordell died, that was such an extraordinarily painful experience that what dominated me for a number of years was fear of having to go through that again and not wanting to open my heart to that. But the place that I got to is I've never lived my life in fear. So why do I want to live my life in fear now when it comes to relationships? So it just took me a while to get there and recognize that I don't want to sacrifice the possibility of loving another person because I'm afraid of what's going to happen, because it is going to happen. You're very aware of that at this stage in life. You're crazy if you don't recognize that, right?
Yeah.
But that experience of being in a loving relationship and being loved in the way that I feel loved, I wouldn't give that up for anything. So I think that's where I arrived with all of it, this capacity to love. We can hold many people, many loves in our hearts.
Oh, let's close up with this one. So thank you everyone for watching. We are going to take a break here, and we see you at our next installment, our last one, where maybe we will be talking a little bit more about practices and different ways to enhance well-being when you're a little bit older, and also maybe some advice for us younger people. When you look at us from the perspective of seeing yourself at our age, what would you advise us, or is there any advice for us, from the perspective now when you look back at your life, anything you regret, and anything you would say, just do this, more of this, don't worry about this. Never worry about this one. So I hope you're going to join us for our last conversation. Thank you so much, ladies, for coming in with the love stories, and I think making our hearts really full. And I hope for many people maybe full of hope as well, that nothing is lost yet. Until you're alive, things can happen, and the capacity for love in our hearts is immense, as Ellen mentioned. So thank you so much, and thank you everyone for watching, and I see you next time. Bye.
Bye.